Good morning again. Good morning.
Morning.
Stragglers, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, we got the group back. The band is back together. Okay, so we won't take time to do the goals and gratitudes today because we're short on time. But you know, it's interesting. I'm coming up on, gosh, let's see. I got into the business in '93. So what it's 2021. How many years is that? 28 years? 28? From 93 to 2021? 28 years. Yeah, so next month, 28 years in the business. It's interesting. I was your age when I got into the business. How old are you?
22.
22, yeah, I was 23 years old. So, and I haven't aged at all, obviously. I was born with this amount of hair, which is true. But I take a look at, you know, when I got my license, I remember laying in bed looking up at my parents' ceiling in their basement because I was still living at home, and I was calculating the number of transactions I was going to close and the dollars I was going to earn from each transaction, and then I did the math off me in terms of how much money I was going to make that first year, and it was $130,000. And back in 1993, that was a lot of money. I mean, I still think today it's a lot of money, right? But it was a lot of money, and I was excited. Being a kid from Orangeville, Utah, who grew up in trailers, you know, whose dad is an ex-convict, and you know, neither one of my parents graduated from high school. They had their GEDs, and you know, that was a lot of money to me. And half that amount would have been a lot of money, but I just knew that's what I was going to do. I was going to make that much money. Well, what is interesting is that my first year, second year, third year, and fourth year, if I added up everything that I earned in those first 4 years, it totaled about half of that. I made about $60,000 in those first 4 years. It was very difficult. In fact, the money was so, you know, few and far between the checks that at one point I had everything packed in my car. I didn't have a place to live. I couldn't afford a place to live. And I ended up for a month living in George's basement. He and Jen were newlyweds, and they were kind enough to let me live in their basement on a couch for a while. You know, and the brokerage that hired me, when they hired me, they said, "Congratulations, you are the first rookie we have hired in our 33 years in business." And I was feeling pretty good about myself, you know. So how would it be possible that a guy who they had obviously seen potential in didn't earn but half of what, you know, he expected, and at one point had everything packed in his car? I mean, things got pretty desperate. You know, it's interesting. A year after they hired me, that company was out of business. That first company that hired me, and so my claim to fame is I put them out of business. You know, obviously, look at my production, right? There was a mistake that they would hire a rookie. Now, I kid, of course, because their success didn't hinge upon some rookie, and if it did, they needed a lot more help. But I look at what they coached and trained me on. It was risk management and compliance. And there's nothing wrong with understanding, you know, how to fill out contracts. And there's nothing wrong with making certain that you don't get in trouble and you keep your license. But they spent a good deal of time on that. Then they also talked about marketing. And I remember the manager saying to me, "John, we're going to make certain the market knows who you are. We're going to let people know that you're in the marketplace." And it seemed to me, you know, Ernie, that was reasonable. As an agent, wouldn't you want people in the marketplace to know that you're in the business? The answer is what? Yeah. You think so. Nobody else thinks so. Do you guys think that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thanks for the verbal response. And so I thought, well, this makes sense. He said, "So come with your best suit on. And do you have a nice car?" I said, "Well, I've got a 1990 Volkswagen Fox." He said, "Well, you're probably going to have to upgrade that. You should go out and get a car." So I went and got a car. I got a 1989 Lincoln Town Car. It was a red exterior, white leather interior. It looked exactly like a brothel on wheels. It was fantastic. So if real estate didn't work out, I could always turn to another business. I'm kidding. But it was beautiful. This red Lincoln Town Car with white leather interior. That was my car. And I told him I got it. He said, "Okay, bring it in." And also he said, "Do you have a dog?" And I said, "Yeah, I got a dog." He said, "Bring your dog." And I'm thinking, where is this all going? I thought we were in, you know, this is real estate. Well, what he did is he had me posing in certain scenes. So on one scene, I was with my dog just sitting there, right? Obviously enjoying time with my dog. At one point, he had me sitting on top of a home. And he said the caption of the ad is going to be "John Ciet on top of the market." he had me sitting in my Lincoln Town Car on the old suitcase phone. If any of you are old enough to remember those big suitcases with the cord connected to like a regular looking phone, that would be mounted on the floor in the car. I know this seems like really weird to you, right? Yeah, it's like otherworldly. But he had me in my car on the phone and taking notes, right? And all of these supposed action scenes. John was busy and doing his thing. And then we put together a marketing campaign, emphasis marketing campaign. And I spent thousands of dollars on shopping cart ads, bus bench ads, homes and land ads, in other words, magazine ads, newspaper ads, and really did a full court press on marketing. It was really cool because I would go to the local grocery store and guess who was on the shopping cart? Me, the guy who was going broke in real estate. And it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't understand it. I spent all this money and putting my face out there, and nobody was responding. Well, after they went out of business and I went from brokerage to brokerage, in fact, in those first 4 years, went to 7 different brokerages, gang, 7, looking for the answer. And then I finally found one, and the mentor who taught me this, that as real estate sales professionals, we're not in the business of selling homes. Homes sell homes. You can't convince a buyer who's looking for a condo to purchase a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch. They're not going to do it. You're not going to convince somebody who wants to buy a $2 million home to purchase a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, $350,000 condo. It's not going to happen. The home sells itself based upon its features and benefits and what the buyer's looking for. Is that true? Yes. Right? So then the question is, and what this gentleman taught me, is that the thing that we're best at and what our real role is to relate with people, to instill a sense of confidence in them that we can help them go through the process of buying or selling real estate, which is a very difficult process, is it not? Yes. Especially now, you take a look at it, the amount of work that you have to do working with buyers, the number of homes you have to show, the number of offers you have to write. And then if you have a listing, it's even more difficult in this market to work with sellers than in the normal market. Even though it's easier to get them onto the contract, the fact is that you're having to fill how many offers? 10, 15 offers. You're trying to sift through all of that. It's a very challenging business. And yet what I know is that the number one skill that you have is your ability to communicate. And that's what he opened my eyes to. And so from that moment on, I really worked on improving the way in which I communicated with people. And what is interesting is that when I started with that company, I was broke. I had bill collectors chasing me. And within 6 years, I was a millionaire. And you might say, well, how is that possible to go from being completely broke, having bill collectors chasing you for a period of time, living in your car, everything packed in there, to being a millionaire 6 years later? Well, it's because I shifted my focus on from what didn't matter to what mattered. And it was really becoming obsessed with figuring out how to communicate effectively. So the thing that I wanted to chat with you about this morning is just the importance of the listing presentation. You all understand that the listing presentation is your most important conversation. Is that not true? Say yes.
Yes.
It is the single most conversation that you can have, most important conversation you can have in real estate. If you can give a great listing presentation, you can give a great buyer broker presentation. And any other conversation that you have to have in real estate is going to be easy if you can do that effectively, if you can have a great conversation when it comes to listing someone's home. The reason most real estate agents work with buyers versus sellers is why? They're easy. Okay. Are they easy to work with? No, in fact, there's a lot more work working with a buyer than there is working with a seller. Is that not true? Think about the number of hours you have to work with a buyer versus a seller. On a dollar or on an hour per basis, who do you make more money with? The seller. But why is it that most real estate agents, knowing that, work with buyers? Say it? Skill set's different. Yes. In other words, you don't have to have a high level of communication skill, right? And there's a reason for that, because why do buyers and sellers have different expectations? Yes, there's the answer. One pays and the other one doesn't. See, the seller pays tens of thousands of dollars, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending upon the price of the home. And when they're spending that much money, they have what? They have expectations. They have high expectations, right? And we have to meet those expectations. And most real estate agents can't meet those expectations. And so therefore don't win in that realm of real estate. So they focus on the buyers, because buyers just simply don't have as high expectations because they're not paying the commission. Does that make sense? So then if that makes sense, then we've got to make certain that we know that it costs more to work with buyers. There's more money to be made in working with sellers. Then we should make certain that we communicate better. We're more effective at the number one conversation that we can have in real estate, which is the listing presentation. So we're not going to talk about the entire presentation, but the thing I just want to talk about this morning very briefly is the opening, the first couple of minutes in the listing presentation. I've got a trick question for you. When does the listing presentation begin? Say it again. Who said it? Oh, I thought it was over here. You said it? Okay. Yeah. Who's? I was like, I heard it, but I didn't see any lips move. So say it again. It's at the pre-qual. Now, take notes on this. I want you to remember this, because what I'm giving you is kind of an outline of what you should be doing and what you should be expecting. Okay, the listing presentation begins at pre-qualification, before you show up at the home. Pre-qualification with the seller involves asking them many questions. You know, how long have you been in the home? How much do you owe on the home? How much are you expecting to get out of your home? When your home sells, where are you planning on moving to next? What's taking you there? All of those questions. Are you the only owner? Are there others on the home, you know, on title? Several questions that you can ask, but the presentation begins at that call. And what I find is that most real estate agents aren't asking those detailed questions before they go out. They're having that conversation when they show up at the kitchen table. And I would tell you that's a mistake, because the more information that you have, the more you can be what? Prepared. Do you not want to have a great conversation when you go out there? Do you not want to separate yourself from the competition? So make certain that you're having that conversation. I know that it's exciting when you set the appointment, right? And then, have you ever done this? You're excited, you set the appointment, hang up, and then realize that you didn't ask the questions, right? Or you don't know enough, and then you get a call back. So remember, when you set the appointment, it's okay to say, okay, great. Now that we've got the appointment set, is it okay if we just spend a couple of minutes? I've got a few questions that I need to ask you to better prepare for our appointment, so that you have a great experience with me and you are going to know exactly what it's going to take to get your home sold, and you're going to feel comfortable and confident in me selling your home. So could we take a few minutes to go ahead and cover these questions? Well, yeah, of course, John. And then I'm going to ask the questions. Don't feel like you have to be in a rush to ask those questions. In fact, you taking the time and asking that begins to do what's very important in any conversation, which is to validate people, to acknowledge people. When you ask these things of them and you listen, they get to tell their story. And when you listen to other people's story, you do what for them? You acknowledge them, you validate them. And that's all that anybody's looking for, is to be validated every single day, every single moment with anybody we interact with. Do you not feel better when somebody acknowledges you, listens to you? We always do. It doesn't matter who it is. It can be a complete stranger. There's a reason that when a driver, a fellow motorist on the 101 gives you the number one sign, you get pissed, because you're wired to be accepted, not rejected. And the number one sign is an absolute what? Rejection. So it doesn't matter if it's a stranger or someone in an intimate relationship with you or a seller, right? You want to be acknowledged and validated. Well, so do your clients. And so asking these questions, right? And I'm not going to go over the questions. That's not the point, because you have a script book. My question is, are you following it? Do you recognize that the listing presentation begins at pre-qualification and you're asking those questions? But here's the reason I'm mentioning that. Because what most people will do, what most agents will do when they sit down with the seller at the kitchen table, what's the first thing that they will say? What's the first thing that you do say? What's the first thing that you should be saying? Yeah, just thank you, right? Now that happens normally. I can't imagine a listing conversation where that isn't happening right out of the gate. It seems to me that that's a very normal thing. The issue is that I believe that there's a missed opportunity there by just simply saying thank you. So what I want you to do is I want you to write this down. I want you to write down thank you. I want you to write down acknowledge. And I want you to write down promise. Thank you, acknowledge, and promise. I'm just going to outline this for you. So the thank you and acknowledgement and the promise, that's what should be happening as soon as you sit down with them at the kitchen table, okay? You would normally thank them. Now, what would you thank them for? What do you think you could thank them for? Okay, for their time having you over, okay? Anything else?
For the opportunity.
Okay, for the opportunity. There are many things you could thank them for, right? What I like to thank them for is this, and it's up to you. You could thank them for any of those things that were just suggested. I like to thank them for the opportunity that they have chosen me versus all their other choices. Because they literally have how many choices in this marketplace? Yeah, everybody. Thousands of licensees, thousands of agents, but yet they chose to meet with you out of all of those options and maybe a couple others. So I'm going to acknowledge that. I'm going to say, thank you. Ernie, thank you for choosing to meet with me versus all the other options that you have, because I recognize you have a lot of options and yet you chose me and I'm grateful for that. So thank you. I'm going to start with that. Now, don't we all like to be thanked?
Yes.
See, if I do that right out of the gate and take the time to say that and say that sincerely, does Ernie maybe feel a little bit better, maybe a little bit important, like a little bit appreciated, like he's probably validated or acknowledged? And the answer is what? Yes. The next thing, though, that I want you to recognize, and this is extremely critical, acknowledge them, but acknowledge them for what? Okay, I can acknowledge them for their time because their time is what? It's valuable. It's important, right? Good morning, Cindy. It is. We can acknowledge them for so many different things, right? But here's the thing that I want you to acknowledge in the thank you, acknowledge, and promise. When you have that conversation with them, the pre-qualification conversation, you're going to discover some things. You're going to discover their needs, their wants, their wishes, their hopes, their desires, and their fears as it relates to this transaction they're about to embark on. We're going to talk about the fact that they've lived in this home for 20 years, raised their kids. You know, maybe it was their first home. Maybe it was the home to end all homes, and they're surprised they're having to sell it. There's some financial issue. Maybe there's a divorce. Maybe there was a recent death. But you're going to discover their wants, their needs, their wishes, their desires, their hopes, their fears, all the emotions that are involved in this process by having that conversation with them. And if in that conversation, that pre-qualification conversation, I discover some of those things and I take notes and write those things down, then when I sit down with them at the kitchen table and I thank them for their time because they have many choices and yet they chose to work with me and I'm grateful for that. And then I acknowledge some of the things that they shared with me in the pre-qualification conversation about their wants, their needs, their wishes, their desires, their hopes, and their fears, whatever those things are, because I wrote some of those things down. I mean, imagine that I had a conversation with somebody who mentioned to me that they were going through a divorce, that this was a shock, that it was something that they weren't expecting. It was a surprise, and that they've been in this home for 20 years and they're devastated. That when I sat down with them, that I acknowledged those things that they shared with me and I used some of their words. You know, I know that you're shocked. I know that you're devastated. I'm going to use back the words that they used with me when we had the conversation, the pre-qualification conversation. If I repeat those words back and some of those ideas back to the seller in that conversation, how do they feel? They feel acknowledged. They felt like I did what? And if I listen, when people listen to what we have to say, what do you think about them? They actually what? They care and they start to what? They start to trust you. Don't miss out on the opportunity to very quickly in the listing presentation, begin to build rapport and value. See, when you acknowledge someone's emotions, whether they're good or bad, wants, needs, wishes, desires, hopes, and fears, when you acknowledge those things out of the gate, it gives people an opportunity to begin to relax because they begin to feel validated, acknowledged, feel like they're safe. Because don't you think they're a bit nervous in this situation, especially with all the personal stuff going on? And then they got to stack on that a multi-$100,000 transaction with somebody they don't know? Say yes.
Yes.
So if you take the opportunity to discover things that are important to them and they express these things that are very emotion-based, their wants, their needs, their desires, their hopes, and their fears, right? You gather all of that, and then you repeat some of those things back to them in the acknowledgement. I acknowledge that, this is a difficult time for you, that you're in shock. And man, you've been in this home for 20 years, you raised your kids, and here you are in this difficult situation. And I just want you to know that, I sympathize, and I'm sorry you're going through that. And I promised you this. You mentioned that you were nervous about this. You mentioned that you've never sold a home before, that this is the first time you've ever done it. And you have a right to be nervous. And I promise you this, by the time that we're done, you're going to know exactly what it's going to take to get your home sold. And you're going to have confidence that I am the person who's best suited to help you do that. I promise you that. So having said that, are you ready to get started? And what do you think they're going to say? Yeah. And you think that yes is going to be a much more confident yes, having said that conversation where I thank them, I acknowledge them, and I promise them. What do you think?
Yeah.
Can you see how that begins to build rapport with them very quickly, very early on in the conversation? Imagine having that sort of conversation and connecting with people that early on, and then being able to transition into the other things that we know that we need to talk about. That's really just business. But it's really important, gang. I want you to remember this, that in a real estate transaction, we have to not only represent value to them, but we also have to connect with them. Those two things have to happen. There has to be a connection, a human-to-human connection, because this is not about real estate. It's not about homes. It's about people. And then we have to show them that we have the ability to actually lead them through the process. Your number one value to your sellers is not your knowledge of the contract. Your number one value is your ability to confidently communicate with them to help them feel safe and secure. Because if you can help them feel safe and secure, then they will follow you to where they need to go, where you know they need to go, doing the things that you know that they need to do in order to help them get what it is that they want. Because who knows best on what they need to do in order to get what it is that they want? You, because you're the professional. You don't walk into your neurosurgeon or to your family practitioner or to your dermatologist and tell them, well, so this is the problem, this is what I want you to do, and this is how I want you to do it. You don't get on a plane and tell the pilot how to fly the plane, do you? Unless you're a pilot and you think that you're a better pilot, right? So just recognize this. It is such a simple thing, but it's such a powerful thing that in the beginning of this conversation, if you gather the right information and you discover their wants, their needs, their wishes, their desires, their hopes, and their fears, and you write down some of the things that they said, and then you repeat back some of those things in those opening minutes with them at the kitchen table, that you begin to build rapport. And with that rapport creates a sense of safety. And when there's safety, that's value. The reason you purchase certain products is because you know those products are going to deliver to you what you want. It's going to meet, the product's going to meet your what? Expectations. And so it makes you feel what? Safe to spend the dollars on that particular product. And that's true whether it's a Q-tip or it's a Toyota. We buy things based upon how they make us feel. And when a product that costs a lot of money makes us feel safe, people are going to be more likely to what? Spend the money. And that's a very necessary part of what we do, because you're not doing this as a philanthropic endeavor, are you? Any of you doing this as a charity? Okay, good. Good. If it feels like that, then we need to really focus on getting more listings, right? Right?
Yes.
Okay. Does this make sense? Okay. What I would suggest that you do is that you practice this in your breakout role play sessions or your role plays with do you have role play partners? Okay. What I would suggest is, a few of you said yes, some of you didn't respond. You should have role play partners. Every single day you should be practicing your skill set of communication in the business of real estate. But practice this. Practice discovering what is important to people in the listing conversation. What are they trying to accomplish? When are they trying to accomplish it? What are their fears about selling a home? What are their concerns? What have been their previous experiences? discover all of that, and then practice repeating some of that back in the thank you, acknowledgement, and the promise. I call it the tap. It's an easy way to remember the tap. When I walk in, I tap. I thank, I acknowledge, and promise. And I repeat back some of those things in the acknowledgement and in the promise in order to validate them, acknowledge them, so that we can begin to build rapport and we build that trust and that confidence so that they'll follow me. Fair enough? Hey, gang.